Welcome back, everybody. John Aravosis here with the Aravosis Report. Welcome all. That is Monday, January 23rd, here with another update on what's going on, the latest news from Russia's war in Ukraine, I should say. Let me get rolling on TikTok here. All right. I've got you guys on my laptop and I've got TikTok over on my iPad. There we go. Here come the TikTokers. Anyway, lots of news today. Lots and lots of news. So interesting news day. Anyway, hello all. Hello mods. Let's see the TikTok. There's the flower lady. You're first. The TikTokers are arriving. Excellent. Excellent. Anyway, as always, guys, do your hellos. Maybe tell folks where you are from, if you would. Otanbat, good to see you. Ashley, hello. Thanks, Derek. Boop. All right, have some more. My water as we wait here. As always, I like to go a minute or two just to give a moment for folks to arrive from TikTok and YouTube, etc., and Twitch and elsewhere. So it just takes about a minute or two. So, hey, Rich. Oh boy, Massachusetts. We got a lot of Americans on TikTok today. Your name? I don't even try to say your last name. Are you kidding? Although I had a Polish teacher, and I'm assuming it's Polish. I had a Polish teacher in high school, Mr. Resch. And his last name, his math teacher, thank you, Andrew. His last name had no vowels. And it was fascinating trying to pronounce a name with no vowels. And it was like WRSCZ, or something like that. It was Resch. So I'm going to assume your last name is like something like that. Anyway, guys. All right. I think we're ready to start. Welcome, everybody. I am John Aravosis. This is my nightly show, Monday to Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern, where we talk about the latest news from Ukraine. As always, I've got the TikTok folks over here on my iPad and over there on my laptop. I've got YouTube and a bunch of other services. So if you see me looking back and forth, that is why. Thanks for joining us tonight. Thank you, Carlos Bond, for the TikTok or the YouTube sticker there. So the way it works is, about the first half of the show, I will go through the news of the day and summarize it for you guys. Second half, I will take your questions and your comments. On TikTok, you can submit your questions via the Q&A link that is in my profile on TikTok. You can even go there now and start queuing up questions. I don't mind. And on YouTube, you can, and elsewhere, you can obviously use the comment box at the bottom. I do appreciate when you do the super chat questions or the super stickers, if you can, because they support my work, as do the gifts on TikTok. I do this for free, and it really helps me, guys, if you guys can do the gifts, because it helps pay the bills. So I appreciate that. So thank you, Bonnie, for that. So let's dive right in. Thank you, Alan. I will also do little shout outs when I see the gifts and everything. So I appreciate that. Thank you, Crusher. That's one of my faves. So the big news today, the TikTokers are relentless already. Thank you, James, for the wave. For the whale. We've got the wave for the whale. TikTok is out of control. Thank you, guys, on TikTok. You're being amazing. So the big news. Oh, Benji, I hadn't even seen that before. That was kind of cool. Oh my God, you guys have got to slow down. Claudia, thank you. Everyone's out of control today. So the big news today is the latest on the tanks. So thank you, Annie, for that. The latest on the tanks. As you know, Ukraine wants to get several hundred tanks from NATO, and they've gotten promises of light tanks from France. Some people don't call them tanks, but some people consider them tanks, but they're smaller tanks, and of around 12 to 14 tanks from the Brits as well. The problem is Ukraine needs something like 200 or 300 of these tanks, so even the British tanks aren't going to be enough. Fast forward to today. What the Ukrainians really want, and what a lot of the NATO military folks think the Ukrainians need, are German tanks called the Leopard 2. These tanks in particular are particularly well suited for Ukraine. They're easier to train on than the American tanks. Thank you, Tattooed Mom. Boy, there's a lot of new, maybe for the new year or something, there's a ton of new stuff on TikTok. Thank you, Messi. Like, all the gifts are new on TikTok. I hadn't even noticed. It must be as of today. That's really cool. I wish you guys could see this, because they're out of control on TikTok today. Thank you, Happy Beach family, for that. So the bottom line is the Ukrainians want these tanks that thank you, Eddie, that the Germans have made. The Germans have sold them around Ukraine, around Europe, that is. Thank you, Zoe. And the hope is, sorry, I kicked my dog. Sorry, Sash. I kicked my dog by accident. As I was talking to you guys. Thank you, Zoe and Bonnie, and Claudia there. Sorry, I know I'm getting like thrown off with all the gifts, but I do appreciate, guys. Thank you. All right, I'm going to try to go on a roll here. So the deal with the tanks is, because the tanks are made in Germany, even if the tanks come from somewhere else, in this case, the Poles have said they would be willing to gift their German tanks to Ukraine. The Finland, at least, has also said it would be willing to give some of its tanks to Ukraine, its German-made tanks. But because the tanks are made in Germany, the Germans have to approve it. Basically, this is something that any country that sells weapons does. The United States does it, Switzerland does it, Germany does it. Basically, we say, if we're going to sell you our weapons, thank you, Jeremiah, if we're going to sell you our weapons, we want to be able to say who you give our weapons to next. In other words, we don't want to be giving our top American weapons to, or selling to, I don't know, Israel, say, and all of a sudden Israel turns around and gives it to somebody we didn't want to give it to, right? Well, all weapon sales work like this. Thank you, Messi, for that. So what is going on is we are waiting, hoping that the Germans will turn around and say, yes, we will let Finland, we will let Poland send our German-made tanks to Ukraine. But the Germans have been kind of waffling back and forth. A lot of the anger with Germany over this, with Scholz, the chancellor in particular, the head of Germany, is that, thank you, Jesse, for the hockey thing there, is that the Germans initially had said, you know, we don't want to be first to give the tanks. We want to do it with other countries giving tanks. So everybody was like, okay, the Germans don't want to be first. I guess I understand that. So the French said, we'll be first. And the French promised a bunch of their tanks. Then the Brits said, you know, the United Kingdom said, we'll be second. We'll give you our tanks too. And everybody said, this is amazing, right? Well, the Germans then turned around and said, well, you know, I know we said we were going to wait until somebody else gave tanks, but now we want the Americans to give their American tanks or we're not going to approve it. Well, over the weekend, things got even more interesting. The German foreign minister is interviewed, I believe, by a French news outlet. And she says in German, I'm pretty sure because it was translated into English, she says, let me see if I can find her quote. Yes. For the moment, the question has not been asked, meaning as of last night, the Germans had not been officially asked by the Poles if they could send their German tanks to Ukraine. So she says, for the moment, the question has not been asked, but if we were asked, we would not stand in the way. Well, everyone said this is amazing. It's a breakthrough. The Germans have now said they won't stand in the way, right? This is great, right? As of last night, the Germans have basically said, we're not going to approve you sending our tanks, but we're not going to stop you and we're not going to punish you, right? Thank you, Matt, for that. And basically, we thought this was a nice way, thanks, Jeremiah, for the Germans of kind of cutting a compromise, basically saying, you know, this way the Russians can't blame us for approving the tanks, but, you know, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, we'll let you. Well, today, that all changed, but then it changed back again. So there's been a lot of waffling here. What was this? Today, the German government said the foreign minister doesn't speak for us. In order for the tanks to even for us to say, even for the Germans to say, we don't care if the tanks get sent, it has to go through a special, I don't even know what it is, but it's a special body in Germany that has to review the transfer. So they totally backtracked on the foreign minister saying this, right? They totally backtracked. Well, then, and I mean, literally every hour this is changing. And this, I got to tell you, this is why people are getting pissed at the Germans, is because this has been happening a lot. In all fairness, Germany has actually given a lot to Ukraine, right? They've given a lot of weapons. They've given a lot of support. So I don't want to knock Germany, and I think it's fair to only acknowledge that. But every step of the way, the Germans kind of go 1 foot forward and then 2 feet back, right? And it's this back and forth, back and forth. We're going to help you. We're not going to help you. We're going to help the Greeks helping you. We're not going to help the Greeks helping you. And it's this back and forth with the Germans. Well, this is the same thing, right? So the latest with the Germans is now the Poles are saying that they're going to create a coalition, and they've been saying this for a few days. They're going to create a coalition to send German tanks to Ukraine, a coalition of other countries who bought the German tanks, okay? And they're saying if Germany doesn't authorize the Leopard 2 tanks, that Poland will create the coalition and send them anyway. Now, here are a couple quotes from the Polish prime minister basically saying just that. We're going to go ahead and help Ukraine anyway. We will not passively watch Ukraine bleed to death. Even if we did not get this approval from Germany, we would, Thank you, Addie, for the skates there. We would still transfer our tanks together with others to Ukraine. He says Germany's consent is of secondary importance. Okay, that's cool, right? That's great. Then we have the European Union's foreign minister, their top diplomat, Joseph Borrell. He then weighs in today and says Germany, I'm just as a paraphrase, according to Sky News, Germany won't block the re-export, he's now saying. He says, from what I understand, Germany is not going to ban the export of these weapons if any EU country that has them wishes to do so. Finally, literally right before I came on, Jake Sherman, I always forget his last name, I think it's Sherman, who's the American National Security Advisor. He came out, Jake Sullivan. He came out and said, there will be news from Germany in just the next few days on all of this. Like, ooh, exciting. It's the back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and that's what's driving us crazy here, okay? Again, the German foreign minister yesterday said, you know what, we're not going to stop you, go for it. Then the German government says she doesn't speak for us, it's got to go through a whole process in Germany. Now the European Union foreign minister, basically implying that he spoke to the Germans, says it'll be okay, they can send them anyway. Which one is it? And here's the other big problem, and this is something that is also sort of a lesson, not that you guys are in politics, but actually, you know what? This is a good lesson for life for you all. Thank you, Purnell, for the gift there on TikTok. This is a good lesson for life. If you're going to end up doing something anyway, okay? If you're going to end up doing something anyway, then get credit for it, right? All of us think the Germans are going to come through in the end and pretty much have to approve these tanks. Or these tanks at least are going to go there anyway, right? We know these countries are going to send them. We've got the American National Security Advisor saying, stay tuned, in a few days now, there will be news from Germany, basically making it clear that the Germans are going to do it anyway. The problem is Germany has so waffled on this in the last week. And mind you, right, we had that whole thing leading up to the meeting with the Ukraine allies on Friday in Germany, where dozens of countries got together to discuss how we were going to help Ukraine. And the big deal was that by then Germany was going to say yes, and then Germany would refuse to say yes. My point here is, if you're pretty much going to end up doing something anyway, don't be so wishy-washy back and forth that you piss off everybody. So by the time you do it, you don't get credit for it. And I worry, thank you, Lisa K, for the flowers. I worry that that's where Germany is now, that they've so, dicked around, to use the American expression, maybe the Brits say the same thing. They've so dicked around with this that they've just pissed everybody off. And when the Germans finally approve this, thank you, Inspired Woman, for the very cool unicorn, that they've so dicked around on this that they're not going to get credit for it. People are just going to be pissed at them. Just why exactly, as Asta Toda is saying, why so reticent? I mean, especially because I think they're going to do it anyway. So what's the freaking problem? In any case, no, you guys have been giving amazing gifts. Thank you guys on TikTok. The one point to throw in as well, I was saying where I think in Germany's case, you might as well get credit, right? So why waffle on these things? If you're going to do it, just do it. But secondly, you empower Russia. And this is something we've talked about, but also the Russians basically came out today and admitted, we're only making the Russians happy by playing this game publicly and having them look at us and say, look at what a mess this is. Now, actually interesting. Ben is just saying on YouTube, Putin is laughing at us from the Kremlin. Listen to that. And by the way, you're right, Ben, because I've got a quote from the Kremlin today. Listen to this. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said the splits in Europe over whether to send tanks showed that there was increasing nervousness within the NATO military alliance. If you're Putin and you're looking at this, you're saying this is not a 100% healthy alliance. This is an alliance that has fractures. It has weaknesses, right? It's almost like it has fault lines, if you want to think like earthquakes, right? And we the Russians either need to keep playing on those fault lines, right? Trying to cause more of a rupture, or at the very least, we need to sit back and basically, I was saying somebody said bingo. What, me mixing up the Germans and the Russians? Was that the bingo? Thank you, Elle. Apparently, a number of folks have created a bingo card to play during the show of the various things I say, including the mistakes I made. So that's very funny. But the but yeah, it's only helping empower Putin and giving him the sort of thinking, hey, if we just hold on longer, we're the Russians, maybe the alliance will fall apart. All right. So make sure you do. So I've got more news. Trust me, we've got a lot of news today. I always like to remind folks, make sure you follow and subscribe on TikTok and YouTube. That's one way you can always help me out. Another way is we have a Discord community, which is basically a community where people can hang out and chat and stuff, 24 hours a day, even on the weekends when I'm not doing too many TikTok videos. It's at discord.aravosis.com. One of the neat things we do with the Discord community, and it's a way of helping finance my work, but also we raise money for humanitarian aid in Ukraine, is I auction off cool stuff that we've gotten from Ukraine. Now, right now we've got going, and I will show you really quick. One of them, of course, fell on the ground. I hope the dog doesn't get her. There it is. Oops. I hope the dog doesn't get her hands into it. There we go. Her claws. I'm dropping the auction stuff. We've got, well, these are the ones I've got going right now. Oops. Blue sky. Yes. These are authentic Ukrainian military patches. Thank you, Kiwi, for that. Authentic Ukrainian military patches with the Velcro on back because they go on the military uniforms. We've auctioning some of these off right now. We've got a ton of different ones of these. I've got an Azov style bracelet. These are the really cool bracelets that the Ukrainian government made as a fundraiser for the military. And it is, I'll show you closely. It is steel. Oops, there we go. It is steel from the Azov style steel plant. And this is the steel plant where the 2,000 Ukrainian defenders fought the 14,000 Russians. Remember when these guys and gals, because it was a woman, there was at least one woman there too, fought for a couple months against the Russians and held out pretty much the entire time. Well, the Ukrainians, in honor of it, made bracelets from the steel, the last batch of steel. Well, I've only got a few of these left. We've had Vlad buy them in Ukraine and ship them to me. The government is not making any more. They're sold out. So we're auctioning this. And then the final cool thing we're auctioning, and I've got more of these we'll be auctioning over the next few weeks, is pieces of a downed Russian fighter jet over Ukraine. This one's my favorite, but you can't hear the clink too much today on this. I need to get a second piece to clink, but I Googled this over the weekend and we found out that it is in fact titanium mixed with some kind of an aluminum alloy, but it is titanium because I was wondering, I can't bend this thing and it weighs nothing. Very cool though. So airplane parts. Anyway, lots of cool stuff. It's discord.aravosis.com. And as I said, it's a way of helping me, and 50% of the proceeds help support my work because literally I'm doing this full time for free, so to speak. And 50% we're channeling into aid in Ukraine. And we have so far, just from the auction alone, channeled $4,000 into aid in Ukraine, which is very cool. And otherwise, we've raised about $80,000 of humanitarian aid, just so you know, in total. All right, let me get back to the news here. New York Times. This was a really freaky story today from the New York Times. So American and European intelligence believes that the Russian government is behind the terror attacks in Spain earlier this year, where people were sending letter bombs to the Spanish prime minister, to the Spanish defense ministry, to the Ukrainian embassy, to the American embassy, among others, to the Spanish defense ministry. Basically, it was the Russians. And they believe it was the Russians. They believe it was the Russian military intelligence working with white supremacists in Russia and basically getting the white supremacists to do this. Now, this is something the Russians have done before, and it's a story a lot of people don't know, and something that I broke this actually about 10 years ago. CNN finally jumped on it. Channel 4 in Britain jumped on it, which helped us a lot, by the way. Thank you, Joe, for that. I appreciate that. Channel 4 jumped on it, which helped a lot. But basically, the Putin government was sort of nudge, nudge, wink, wink, letting neo-Nazis in Russia attack LGBT people. And they were basically kidnapping gay and trans people, a lot of them young kids. One of them was a 14-year-old boy that they kidnapped and basically terrorized these guys and filmed them and then put the videos. And I mean, a lot of it was literally torturing these guys, beating them up on camera, putting the video on Russian social media, right? And the Russian social media people wouldn't do anything about it. Pavel Dorov, the big Russian now who's with Telegram or whatever the hell he is, he was running VK at the time. His people wouldn't do a thing. We reported those videos. They refused to take them down. So Pavel Dorov, keep in mind who that guy is as far as that goes. You know, these Russians. I mean, but in any case, bottom line is the Russians have for a long time, thank you, Paramarine, for the gift there. The Russian government for a long time has worked hand in hand with white supremacists and with neo-Nazis, and they haven't cared. So keep that in mind whenever you hear the Russians talk about World War II and how, oh, they defeated the Nazis and how the Ukrainians are Nazis. It's projection, folks. All right. Anyway, let me go on. But in any case, so yeah, the letter bombs look like they were sent by the Russians. Russia and Estonia are having sort of a bigger and bigger diplomatic brouhaha. The Russians kicked out the Estonian ambassador to Russia today. This was great. They accused the Estonians of destroying relations, and this is my favorite because it sounds like a Valley Girl Russian. And they accused the Estonians of total Russophobia. Total Russophobia. That was the accusation. The Russians love this whole BS with Russophobia. It's frankly, it's part of the Russian homophobia, actually. The Russian government, big fan of, thank you, Bonnie. Thank you. That's a very nice one, Bonnie. Thank you for that. The Russians are a big fan of using official homophobia to try to rally the troops at home. And I say the troops, I mean the public at home. Very homophobic anyway, but also like to sort of use it to have an enemy at home, because as we know, these kind of regimes like to have enemies. The Russians and the Soviets before them, Jews were their enemy before, among others. Gays are their enemy today, trans people are their enemy today. And also it's a way of having a distinction with the West, because the West is growing increasingly accepting, right, of gay and transgender people, bisexual people, that it's a way for the Russians to say, look at those perverts over there, right? You know, we're not like them, right? Well, in any case, total Russophobia. So the earlier this month, Estonia announced it was going to reduce the size of the Russian embassy in Tallinn, the Estonian capital, because the staff was not interested in advancing Estonian-Russian relations. And Lithuania announced earlier that it was that it kicked out the Russian ambassador last April. Latvia, last little point here, Latvia, these are all the Baltic countries. Latvia, as a show of support for Estonia, expelled the Russian ambassador today as well. So I don't know that there's so much significance about it, but it's interesting. It's interesting. Oh yeah, possibly related. This might be related to it. Estonia announced that it is giving Ukraine all of its 155 millimeter howitzers. Howitzers are artillery pieces, in the largest aid package so far. So that's a big deal. And again, I think that's also part of the reason the Russians got pissed, because the Baltic states have been really at the front of helping the Ukrainians. And it just ticks the Russians off, because the Russians, mind you, think that the Baltic states belong to them, right? If you look at the map, you look sort of at Northern Europe, and in the east, you'll see Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, and these are three independent countries that were basically eaten up by the Soviet Union, which was pretty much Russia, you know, run by the Russians, among all the other countries that, like Ukraine, that Russia annexed. Basically, they did it to the Baltic states as well. And when the Soviet Union dissolved in 1991, finally the Baltic states were free, and the Russians never got over it. And they want those countries back. And the Baltic countries, considering they're right on the border and they're small, they're members of NATO now, but they're right on the border and they're small. They are probably the most outspoken people when it comes to standing up to the Russians. It's really kind of amazing. I mean, the Germans are worried and everything else. The Baltics, they're right there. I mean, the Russians would love to invade and take those countries back. And on a daily basis, they just sit there and tell the Russians to go, to go screw themselves. It's really kind of amazing. Turkish president. Oh, yes. Turkey. Okay. One more. I've got more news, but I'll give you another story and then we'll do another quick little break. So Turkish President Erdogan, you remember that Sweden and Finland are trying to join NATO. The way it works is when any country wants to join NATO, all members of NATO need to vote and approve it. Okay. Well, in this case, everybody except two countries have now voted and approved Sweden and Finland joining NATO. The two remaining are Hungary and Turkey. Hungary had said that early January, which is already, they were going to vote and approve. Hasn't happened yet, so little worried about that. Let's see what happens in Hungary. Turkey has been playing games. Erdogan and Turkey got a deal last year, many months ago, with the Swedes and the Finns, and basically said, I want X, Y, and Z for us to approve your membership. The Swedes and the Finns did it. And the Turks, being Turks, turned around and said, we've decided to move the goalposts and ask for more because we know we've got you by the, right? So the Turks started demanding more. They wanted like 130, Turkish dissidents extradited from Sweden to Turkey so the Turks could throw them in jail. Went through the Swedish courts, and one guy in particular they want. The Swedish court said no, we're not going to let you deport this guy. Sweden, like America, is a democracy. In Sweden, just like America, if you want to deport somebody, meaning the country itself says we're going to send you to another country to go to jail, basically, it has to go through a legal process. And if the legal process isn't correct, then it's not going to work. And the Swedish court said, no, we're not going to let you. Well, Erdogan freaked out and said, I don't care. I don't freaking care. You better send me that guy anyway. And now, and this is the latest excuse. And by the way, all of this, I think, is Turkey negotiating at the last minute because they want to get weapons from America. That is what all of this is about. Okay, I'm gonna have a quick sip of water since people tell me to drink. So the latest is yesterday, this idiot white supremacist, racist, Danish/Swedish, I guess, joint national. He's a far right leader in both countries. And he decides he's going to have a protest near the Turkish embassy, basically an Islamophobic protest, right? Because he's a racist. I mean, the guy's a racist. And what does he do? Everyone wants to see the map. You want to see the map? Here's the map. Okay. I haven't had need for the map yet, but if you want to, they want to see my Ukraine map. We will talk about the Ukraine map in a bit, potentially. But I see. People can't drink until they see the map. That's very funny. That's very funny. So this idiot holds a protest near the Turkish embassy in Sweden. Okay. And what does he do? He decides to burn the Koran at the protest. And now the Koran is the Muslim holy book. It is akin to the Bible for us. Okay. And this idiot decides to burn it because, I mean, to me, those kind of protests drive me crazy. It's like people who burn the American flag. I'm like, but actually it's worse than the American flag to me. Don't go burning. I don't care if you're religious or not. Don't go burning people's holy books. I mean, to me, that's the same thing like burning a Bible. Like, why? It's just obnoxious. I mean, even if you're not religious, it's just obnoxious. Why do that, right? Nonetheless, he goes and he does it. And what happens, of course, never one to miss an opportunity. Erdogan freaks out today, and I don't know if I have the exact quote. Yes, listen to this from Erdogan today. Those who allow such blasphemy in front of our embassy can no longer expect our support for their NATO membership. So Erdogan is pulling the NATO membership of Sweden over the fact that Sweden, being a democracy, had no choice. I would even say that they didn't allow. Sweden, being a democracy, could not stop the protest. So Erdogan is saying, we're not going to let you join NATO now. Now, of course, what Erdogan is doing is showing you why Turkey shouldn't be a member of NATO or the EU, because Turkey doesn't even understand what freedom of speech is. Turkey doesn't understand what democracy is. And if Turkey is going to sit, and also Turkey does not understand the common defense and why it is so important for Sweden to join. But I would say especially in terms of democracy. They don't understand democracy. And if that's the way they're going to be, if you're not a democracy, you shouldn't be part of the European Union and you shouldn't be a part of NATO. That is absolutely should be a requirement to be a member in either of our organizations. Now, Turkey can be expelled, but it's got to be unanimous from all the other countries. And, it's not clear the US would do it. It's also not clear that, Hungary, being Hungary, maybe they would jump in too. I don't know. But it's incredibly obnoxious. And bottom line is, I will tell you, translation of what Erdogan in Turkey is saying, America, I don't want F-16s. I want the F-35s. I want your newest fighter jets, and I don't want them tied to this deal. I want your newest fighter jets. That's what he's doing. He wants more weapons from us. And what bothers me is this is very much like Putin in Russia. When you when you show a dictatorship your weakness, a dictator your weakness, when you basically go, we're afraid of you and we really want this badly and we're afraid, would you please do this? They're going to ask you for 10 times more things. And he knows he's got us by the balls, basically. And he's doing this. And I really wish at some point the US would say, you know what? If you're gonna F around, then right, maybe you, first of all, forget the weapons in the future. You're not going to get any weapons from us. We're only going to sell weapons to the Greeks. And actually, we're going to sell more weapons to the Greeks. If you want to go to the Russians, be my guest. Russia's going to be on your doorstep if you want to go to the Russians, right? You want Russia to annex you, Turkey? You go for it, right? But at some point, somebody needs to stand up to the Turks and say, you know what? This alliance goes two ways. And if you're not going to do it, then don't. But I will tell this to the Europeans. This is what you're going to get if Turkey joins the European Union. I mean, and of course, Turkey's never going to join the European Union until they straighten out the Cyprus situation. But you're getting a perfect example. Greece in the EU, yeah, the Germans don't like having to help Greek, bail Greece out. Fair enough. But you don't get this kind of garbage from the Greeks. You get this kind of garbage from the Turks. Anyway, that would be my lobbying I would do to get the Turks and go, you know what? Fine. You don't want to join any European institutions? Kiss it goodbye. I do have more news. God, there's a lot of news today. Please do keep the super chats and the super stickers and the gifts coming. Like I said, those are very helpful to support my work. I do this for free, and I've been doing it since the war broke out, and I'm doing it full time. So you guys are the ones who support my work, so I appreciate it. Please do keep the gifts coming, help pay the bills. Lots of other news. The European Union finally was able to approve 500 million in military aid, 500 million euros, which is more or less the same in dollars. In military aid, Hungary lifted its objection. Macron in France said that the French will not rule out sending Leclerc tanks to Ukraine. That would be a big deal. They're big, useful, big honking tanks. It has not been approved yet. Thank you, Marcy. Has not been approved yet by the French, but by saying it, he's kind of signaling, people think he's signaling that that's going to come at some point. So that's a big deal. Morocco, this was kind of a cool story. Morocco, the Moroccans and the Tunisians were the two African countries, North African countries. Thank you, El, for those. North African countries, actually, I would say the two African countries, because it's not like anybody else was there, attending this summit in Germany on Friday at Ramstein that all of the supporters of Ukraine were having. Thank you, Truthful, for the hat there. And the Moroccans turned around and offered to send tanks to Ukraine. Basically, Morocco has 20 T-72B battle tanks that are Russian tanks. They bought them from Belarus back in 1999, 2000, and they agreed to sell them to Ukraine, which is great. I mean, the Ukrainians already, thank you, Gray, for that. The Ukrainians already know how to use these tanks. Thank you, Crusher, because the Ukrainians have been using similar tanks themselves since up until now. The Ukrainian tanks have all been the Soviet tanks, right? So it's good because they're tanks they already know how to use. They're tanks that in principle they already have spare parts for, right? So all of that's great. The other thing I was going to say is the tanks were being modernized in the Czech Republic and were sent to Ukraine a week ago. So the tanks have already been sent, but they were being modernized, which is nice too, because it means hopefully the tanks are even a little bit better, right? So anyway, thank you, real Dudley for the crown there. Zelensky's been making some progress on the anti-corruption move. And this is important because, the critics of Ukraine have kind of gone crazy saying Ukraine's a corrupt country. Unfortunately, like a lot of countries, but I would also say, especially once you move further east, Turkey, Greece, Ukraine, Russia. I can't speak for the other countries in the area, but certainly those guys, you get corruption. You do. But, Greece and Turkey have got it too. I mean, a lot, right? So what Zelensky's been doing has been trying to clamp down. He fired a deputy infrastructure minister for basically allegedly embezzling $400,000. Somebody on Zelensky's own staff, one of his deputies in his office or whatever, was just either let go or fired because he allegedly was using an official vehicle for basically joyriding. So basically took an official, basically acting like a Russian government official, right? Thinking you get all of these vehicles and everything, and you're so cool, right? You get to use the vehicle and drive around, and he got fired as a result. So it's good. I mean, and a member of Zelensky's own party in the legislature also was accused of some kind of corruption, and they've kicked him out of their party. So, they're trying. I mean, it's good steps in the right direction. Let me look here. Oops, hang on. A couple more stories. The last little story I'll tell you really quick is the Sky News was talking about how a report from the Institute for the Study of War, which is a think tank I really like, the defense think tank here in DC, and ISW was reporting on the recent reshuffling in the Kremlin, how basically, remember how the guy that was in charge of the war, Surovkin, on the Russian side, just got fired, not fired, but he got demoted. And they moved over Gerasimov, who is the Russian chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, but they don't call it there. I think they call it the chief of staff. I forget what they call it there. I used to know what they call it in Russia, but basically the top uniformed military official in Russia. He now took over the war in Ukraine, and they've also making plans to expand the military, lots of stuff. And Putin's trying to basically doing this to kind of streamline things more and get it under his control, but also to basically take a swipe at Pregosian. Pregosian is the Russian billionaire, the oligarch, who is created and is in charge of the Wagner Group, which is the mercenary group. By mercenaries, I mean basically literally soldiers for hire. They hire these guys as soldiers around the world to work, like, for example, in Mali, in Africa. The government hired them, and the Pregosian, though, has been building up his he's been building up his power. Basically, first of all, he's got a military. He's got his own military right under his fingers, which is a little scary to the Russians. I'm sure to Putin. Second of all, he is in charge of his own. Basically, they've been going after. I can show you the map now. The attack the Russians have been doing for probably like 6 months now against Bakmut in eastern Ukraine. Bakmut, more or less where my finger is. Okay, Bakmut and the near suburb of Soledar have been in the news a lot the last couple of weeks because Soledar is the town that it looks like, thank you, Ben, I'll get to that in a sec, that it looks like the Russians probably did now take control of, but the bigger city, Bakmut, they're still trying to get, and they haven't gotten. Bakmut is the town that a lot of the defense experts have been scratching their heads because strategically, it's not important enough for the Russians to take. The Russians have been fighting for 6 months. They've lost thousands of their own men. They've lost tons of equipment. It makes no sense why the Russians would do this. Well, one of the lot of reasons, there's some mineral mines there, but also it's believed that Pregosian has been doing this because he has now been fighting. His troops have been fighting for so long trying to take Bakhmut that if they don't take it, it'll look bad, right? It'll look bad. So what? Okay, I'm not even sure what that is. It'll look bad. So anyway, so anyway, here's the thought. I'm sorry. I was telling you the story here. I was reading some of the comments on TikTok here. So what Institute for the Study of War is saying is that the Putin has basically sidelined Pregosian a bit. He's centralized his control over the military, and the concern is that it actually is going to help. That over the next couple of years, this probably will make the Russians a more effective fighting force. Now, they may not be effective enough, right? But at least it will make them more effective. So anyway, all right, let's go to the Q&A and all of that. Ben, I've got your first question here. Everybody else on TikTok, feel free to put questions in the Q&A link in my profile. Ben, let me go right here to yours. What do you think of the Russian Duma speaker saying that the delivery of weapons to Ukraine would cause a global catastrophe? I say pshaw. No, I mean, it's the same BS from the Russians. It's the same BS they always do, right? It's the same thing. I mean, he, as I recall, he was basically threatening nuclear war again. This is what they do. They can't win. All they can do is threaten nuclear war over and over and over again to try to convince the Americans, but especially the Europeans, that, it's all getting so dangerous. Maybe we should stop helping Ukraine, or at least let's not give them tanks and things because that's just too dangerous, right? The Russians keep threatening nuclear war. I'm not going to go through the whole explanation, but anybody who's watched the show knows literally every day we've got the Russians threatening nuclear war. At some point, I don't want to say put up or shut up because I don't want them to put up, but it's been 11 months of this. They're not going to do it. I mean, literally, this is the little kid who every day after school threatens to hit you. And after, 11 months of it, you're like, oh, yeah, on the way home, just be aware we're going to walk by this little kid who's going to go, next time I'm going to hit you. I mean, it's like, it reminds me, what is it on, is it the Simpsons with that, like the monkey, going, Rrr. It's like, how many times are they going to do this? It's the boy who cried wolf or the boy who cried nuke. No, it's ridiculous. No. So, I mean, that's my response. I mean, give me a break. I know. If anything at this point, they're helping Ukraine by doing that, though. They're helping because by doing it now so much, it shows how desperate they are that they don't have anything else, I mean, really watching them on TV. Julia Davis, who's born in Ukraine and does this Russian media monitor and basically watches Russian news so you don't have to, and then and then translates. It does translations on them and publishes them. And one of the things she did recently was one of the top Russian mouthpieces. I think it's. I forget if it's Simonyan or the other one, but I think she's the one who's the head of RT. I think it's her. And she was giving a speech basically once again talking about the nuclear thing. Well, we won't have any choice but to use nukes. So, of course, Julia calls her on it and writes a piece in the Daily Beast calling this Russian woman out on basically calling for nukes. And now the Russian woman is denying it. She's on her show and she goes, she said, I called for us to use nuclear weapons. That's not true. And it's like, so they can't even get their story. They're losing. I mean, they're losing. There's nothing else they can do. What do you do? All right, let me look here. I'm getting hungry all of a sudden. I ate before the show, but like having a salad would not. Ooh, pure Jew? Actually, not Jewish at all, but I'd be very proud to be Jewish because Jews are hot and they're smart and successful. Many of the ones I know. And I am very admiring of my Jewish friends. So happy to be Jewish. If somebody wants to grab that, I'm reporting that guy. Actually, somebody grab that. Hang on. Because I know people is somebody able to grab that guy? Did you were able to grab the comment or not? Did it go already? Comments like that, I want folks to grab because I know people at TikTok now. Grab that stuff in the future because I know people at TikTok now. And that kind of stuff I have already been sharing with them. So, I mean, the stuff that is horrific kind of comments like that, like the anti-Semitic stuff, share it with me because that shit, the one who made the Jewish comment. Yeah, I don't just want it reported. In the future, grab a copy for me because I report it to the people I know. That's what I mean. No, it's not your guys' fault. You didn't know this. But yeah, in the future, grab a screen capture and send it to me. No, it's some anti-Semitic crap, but like that stuff just pisses me off. I mean, and, people have to show you. Do a screen capture on your phone or your computer. Somebody just sent a very nice gift. Thank you, Inspired. Hockey. You Canadians. I forget. Are you Canadian? I always forget the Canadians and their hockey. All right, guys. I was going to do. Hold on a second here. Oh, sorry. Rob is saying, I saw a report that the Wagner Group is getting weaponry directly from North Korea. That's what we heard the other day. Yep. Over rail lines, bypassing the Russian military. Thank you for that. For the, who was that? This is Death for the llama. Thank you. American intelligence put that out the other day. I think we even released some video saying that there are showing rail cars coming. Thank you, Hazel. Now that I say I'm hungry, Hazel decides to put a turkey dinner in front of me on TikTok. Thank you, Hazel. But I'm dying here. Yes, the American intelligence came out and said that the North Koreans are supplying weapons directly to the Wagner Group, which is the Russian mercenary group. So very interesting. And a lot of the analysts are saying that it shows how hard up the Russians are. That basically, if they've got to go to the North Koreans for weapons, they're not doing well. And it confirms the fact that it confirms what Western analysts are saying is that the Russians are in trouble in terms of their weapons. Oh, I'm sorry. That's right. I was going to go and check out my. That was a nice gift, but it also made me even hungrier. Hang on a second. Going to go into my TikTok here. Well, you know what I did? As a snack before eating, I went and made a salad, and I haven't made salad in a while, and I forgot how little salad holds you over when you're hungry. It didn't hold me over at all. It's like eating Chinese food or something. I'm starving now. What do you think NATO can do to get Turkey to back down on Finland and Sweden? Honestly, they've got to threaten them at this point. They've got to threaten them, possibly threaten them with kicking them out, but at the very least, they've got to threaten them with weapons. I mean, the Americans have already said that they were going to they were offering a new weapons package to Greece and Turkey. The Greeks were going to get the F-35, I guess, which is like the newest fighter jet. The Turks would get the F-16, a little bit older, but the Turks wouldn't get it until the Turks ratify Finland and Sweden joining NATO. So it was already meant as something like that. Well, I'm thinking this today with Sweden is Turkey's way of responding, saying, how dare you threaten us and say that we're not getting the weapons? You know, we're just not going to let them join at all. But this is where, again, you are dealing with people who this is the way they negotiate. They reach an agreement, and when you do everything, it's Donald Trump. Trump does this too. When you do everything they want and the contract is finished, they say, well, we're not going to pay you unless you cut the price in half, or in this case, you pay us even more. Right? They're trying to get more from us. And I think we should turn around and say, you're not getting exactly no soup for you. You're not getting anything. You're not getting any weapons, and you're not getting any weapons until you get it. And America, effective immediately, which I assume we are anyway, effective immediately is putting Sweden and Finland under our nuclear umbrella. And they're going to be going to all of our meetings and everything else. And if you don't like it, too bad. But I would tell the Turks to go screw themselves at this point. You know, and you double the amount of aid you just promised Greece. Because if you want to freak the Turks out, say, okay, the only thing that's been keeping us giving, equal aid to Greece and Turkey, Turkey's in NATO, Turkey is in NATO, yep, is the fact that both of you are in NATO. But if Turkey wants to act like they're not in NATO, okay, then we'll just help the Greeks. I mean, that's the best way to freak the Turks out. No, but I think at some point, and I get why Biden may not want to do that, because, it's in his best interest as an American president to try to keep Turkey in the fold. Having said that, who knows? The Biden people could be telling Turkey that privately. They could be telling him privately and say, you know what? You're never going to get weapons from us again. You can play. And if you really want Russian weapons after all of this, okay, be my guest, Yeah, so there's a whole thing. Otanbat's mentioning the asylum seeker in Norway. Kind of a weird development today. So this, who's also named Medvedev, ironically, because that's also the drunk who's a top Russian official who's always threatening us with nuclear war. Not that narrows down who we're talking about in Russia, but Medvedev, who's the Wagner Group mercenary who escaped and defected across the Norwegian border, snuck his way into Norway. The Russians were in hot pursuit, and he defected. Well, he says he's going to come clean and give all the secrets and everything away. Well, now, for whatever reason today, the Norwegian government arrested him like yesterday. There's some fear by some human rights groups that he's going to be deported to Russia. I doubt that. I mean, let me put it this way. Thank you, Hazel. I don't think he's going to be deported if he's on the up and up. Thank you, Kanausi, for that as well. If this guy's for real, he's not going to be deported. If he's not for real, if they found out that he's just basically a Russian spy, which he could be, and they may have found it out, they may have arrested him and said, you're going back. And that's it. It's also possible that this guy came across and said he was going to help us with all sorts of intelligence, which he did say, about Wagner Group. And he turned around and now he's in Norway and going, I'm cushy. I'm not giving you anything. Basically pulling an Erdogan. Maybe he said, I want more now. I want more, or I'm not going to tell you anything. And maybe what the Norwegians told him was, okay, well, enjoy Moscow. Right. So that's possible too. The final possibility is, I had read too that this guy basically wasn't allowed to roam all over Norway, right? Because he's still a Russian mercenary who's killed people, that they're trying to figure out what his story really is. And he wasn't willing to agree. Thank you, Bonnie, for the gift there. He wasn't willing to agree to the Norwegian terms about not being able to travel. And he started going out of his apartment and going places. And the only way to stop him from doing that was arresting him. So I don't know. it could be a lot of everything. Also, frankly, the Russians are going to kill him the first chance they get. So he should be under some kind of protective custody anyway. So that's possible too. I mean, Webadeb is saying that, so who knows? I think there is a 0% chance that if this guy is for real, that the Norwegians are going to just deport him and throw him back to Russia. They're not going to. There's no reason. It's not like the Russians could threaten and do that. They're no. So I wouldn't be worried about that. I'm going to yawn at you too while I get hungry. Ooh. Well, that's the danger. I mean, who is this? William in Minnesota is saying on TikTok, truly the Russians don't need to win right now. They just need to wait. Either the money will dry up or a Republican president will stop giving aid. I mean, that is what they think. That is what they think, right? Who knows? That's what they think. We don't know. We just don't know. Thank you for that. Certainly the Republican House of Representatives is a bigger threat. We know that, right? Because it's the MAGA crowd that's in charge. And they are not supportive of Ukraine. They are supportive of Putin. Beyond that, I think, okay, look, America had already pretty much appropriated enough weapons for the year, pretty much, right? It was like $45 billion for weapons and for economic aid and everything else. So in principle, the Americans Biden may already have the money we need for the rest of the year, for all of 2023, which is great. Europe, if anything, support's growing in Europe. I mean, the thing with the Germans is a bit annoying, but otherwise, all of a sudden now, just in the last couple of weeks, right, we went from light tanks to now the Germans potentially finally allowing, however, the German tanks to go. We've got the Patriot missile batteries. I mean, you've got a lot of stuff going on. I think support is only growing. If I were the Russians, if I were advising the Russians, I'd say, sure, at some point, support may dry up for Ukraine at some point. Yes. It's not happening yet, and support is actually growing clearly. And frankly, it's growing because of what you're doing, because you keep doing so many human rights violations and so many war crimes in Ukraine that you're building support for the Ukrainians. It's possible in a few years that support dries up, but are you going to be around in a few years? Because that's always my question for this. Can Russia hold out? Sure. Russia has a lot of weapons and there's always that, right? So there's always, the Russians can hold out, but can they really? Can the Russian military hold out? Really? I mean, anyway, I just think it's something to keep in mind. It's not clear. Nobody's paying for my PR service, and I wish somebody would. I have no PR service. So, more questions. Yes, Ben is raising the question with the Abrams. Now, mind you, I'm seeing a lot of different stories about the Abrams, which are the American tanks that the Germans want us to send to Ukraine. One of them is that a lot of the Abrams tanks have depleted uranium in the armor around the tanks, which helps protect them. And that is, it is a protection for the tanks that we wouldn't even want our top allies to get. It's so top secret, right? So to actually get that removed from the tanks so that we could get them to Ukraine would take a lot of work and a lot of time. So that may be true. There's a lot of back and forth I'm seeing about this, about the Abrams and whether or not they're so much more complicated and so much more heavy and so much more fuel inefficient and blah, blah, blah than the German tanks. Bottom line is the German tanks are available from like 14 different countries. It would be very helpful. The Abrams supposedly require 50% more fuel than the German tanks and the other tanks in Europe. That's what they're saying. It uses jet fuel, but then I saw some people saying it can use jet fuel, but it can also use diesel fuel. So lots of different stuff there. Hey, B. Smith, thank you for that. B. Smith is saying or asking, can Russia still technically win the war over time, since they could cut off oil and gas to Europe, causing economic and political chaos? The only problem with that is the Europeans have done a pretty good job in terms of becoming more energy efficient and I mean, getting off the Russian oil and gas. The big question will be for next year, right? Because Germany, for example, was able to store up a lot of Russian natural gas before the winter, knowing the Russians were going to probably cut them off. The question becomes, spring and then maybe next fall, where Europe stands. As of right now, it's not a problem. Clearly, the Europeans have really done really well. I mean, have done a really good job of sort of switching to other sources. But I would love to see somebody who's an energy expert kind of weigh in now and say, okay, right, we've dodged the bullet. Thank you, Pam, for that. We've dodged the bullet the first year, right? This first winter, clearly we dodged the bullet, and the winter has been unusually warm around in most places. In Europe, I believe, but certainly in America, but in Europe too. I mean, even here in Washington, it's like a high of 45 to 50 for the next 2 weeks, which in Fahrenheit, you can Google what that is in Celsius. That's just unusually warm for here. It's been an other than that craziness at New Year's when we all froze like to death, it's been unusually warm. You just haven't needed to use as much energy. So anyway, I don't know, but like I said, I'd like to see what an energy expert says about where do we go from here? What is Russia's ability to strangle Europe with energy starting in the spring and the summer and then next winter? Or have the Europeans made things so much better by switching to other sources that the Russians don't have as much pull? I don't know. Yeah, or liquid natural gas as well. Kiki is saying Europe saved up enough liquid gas to get them through 2024. I know they've been building a lot of liquid natural gas terminals in Europe. I don't know whether it was Southern Europe or Northern Europe or both. The Greeks, I know, were doing a lot of stuff as well to be able to get stuff in. So I don't know. I just don't know. 4 more minutes, and then I'm going to get some food. We can go to the Discord, but I've got to get some food or I'm going to die. The problem is I've got like some banana bread I made in the fridge, but I want it later, and I don't want to be eating banana bread for dinner, but there's a danger of that. There's a danger. No news on the situation between Turkey and Greece, other than Turkey keeps threatening to go to war, which would be a disaster. But then again, Turkey's not winning any friends right now. So they ought to be careful with that. Do you think siloed ICBMs in Russia actually work? Well, okay, that's a really interesting point. Thank you, Alan, for the llama there. This was a really neat point that I saw somebody make a couple of weeks ago, that we are constantly asking, do the Russian nuclear weapons even work, right? And it's a good point. We don't know. I've been saying that it doesn't really matter, meaning if the only way to find out if Russian nuclear weapons work is for Russia to launch its nuclear weapons, I think we need to assume they work, right? The safest thing to do is to assume they work, because we can't run the risk of some of them actually working, right? So my point is, we shouldn't do something that per se would force the Russians to use their nukes. I mean, if we really knew the Russians were going to use the nukes, assuming Russian nukes don't work, you've got to assume they work. But, and this is interesting. Thank you, Chelsea, for the gift there. This is an interesting point somebody raised a few weeks ago that I thought was really interesting, is Putin himself may be afraid to use his nukes, because think of the power Putin has had because he's got nukes, right? Oh, was that the Affleck? Wasn't even thinking that was the Affleck duck. Thank you for that. Thank you, Hazel, as well, for the llama. Think of the power that the Russians have been able to wage, right? That we're willing to help Ukraine, but we're really being careful of how much we help Ukraine because Russia has nukes and all of that, right? All the worry about Russia's nukes. What happens if Putin tries to use his nukes and they don't work, right? I mean, right? All of a sudden, Russia goes from being a second-rate military power, a third-rate economy, a joke, other than the fact that they've got nuclear weapons and they've got oil and minerals, right? And natural gas. Thank you, Zoe, for that. They've got oil, minerals, and natural gas. John McCain, famous American senator, Republican, once commented about Russia, and he said, Russia is a gas station with nukes. Basically meaning they've got oil and they've got nuclear weapons, but that's all they've got. They're not really a country in many ways. Well, or they're too many countries in some ways as well, right? If Putin were to try to use his nukes and they didn't work, God help him, right? God help him. Because all of a sudden, America and China to start with, let alone Ukraine too. I mean, Ukraine, the whoop ass that Ukraine would unleash on Russia if we found out Russian nuclear weapons didn't work anymore. Woo! So Putin himself is in a situation where pretty much he has to bluster and threaten nukes, but not actually use them, because if he used them and they didn't work, Russia would no longer be a nuclear power. And then really nobody would care what Russia thinks. All right. Let me give a quick recap of the news that we talked about tonight. And then, as I said, I may grab a quick snack and go over to the Discord. So, lot of back and forth on the German tanks. We talked about the fact that the German foreign minister said yesterday that Germany was going to basically look the other way if Poland and others want to give their tanks to Ukraine. That's fine. Then the German government today said she doesn't speak for us. Then the who was it? The European Union foreign minister then turned around and said, well, actually, I think it'll be okay if we give the tanks. So there's a lot of mixed messages coming from the Germans there. What else we got? The Kremlin commented on the fiasco and basically rubbed their hands maniacally with thrill over the fact that NATO was arguing about tanks. The New York Times says American and European intelligence officials believe that Russian military intelligence was responsible for the terrorist attacks in Spain, sending letter bombs to Spanish, Ukrainian, American, and other officials. Russia expelled Estonia's ambassador today, accusing them of total Russophobia. And Latvia responded in solidarity by expelling the Russian ambassador in response. Estonia announced that it is giving all of its 155 millimeter howitzers to Ukraine in its largest aid package yet. My dog wants to go out. Turkish President Erdogan got upset because it was an anti-Turkey protest where some idiot far-right white supremacist decided to burn a Koran. And Erdogan is now saying, we're not going to let Sweden join NATO anymore, blah, blah, blah. It's like listening to Putin with nukes, listening to Erdogan, you know? After Hungary lifted its objections, the European Union has agreed to send 500 million euros in military aid to Ukraine. President Macron says that he would not rule out sending Leclerc tanks to Ukraine. Morocco just agreed to sell, and actually already did. They've already provided the tanks to Ukraine, 20 T-72B Russian battle tanks. My dog is defending me against the neighbors, as she does. Sasha. Hey, get in here. She saw the neighbor in his apartment, and for 13 years now, she's gotten very, very, very upset when the neighbor is in his apartment, either lifting the curtains or lowering them. Very upset. So she's defended me for 13 years now against the same guy, who's actually a very nice guy. Zelensky took some additional steps towards sort of anti-corruption steps, getting rid of some officials that were corrupt. And finally, we talked about the Kremlin reshuffling of their military, and how the Institute for the Study of War says that they're actually concerned that the Kremlin sort of shuffling may actually be beneficial to Russia. So they're a little bit worried about that. All right, guys, I'm going to sign off. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, mods, and everybody else. I will go to the Discord in a little bit, discord.aravosis.com. I've just got to throw some food in my face before I die here. But I'll go there for a little bit, and otherwise we will see you guys tomorrow night. Are you the one that won Sasha in the auction for $1 million, Annie? Yeah. All right, guys. But thank you again. Thank you, mods, as always, for keeping everybody keeping us safe from all the crazies. And I will see you guys tomorrow, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, US. All right. And thank you for the gifts, as always. You guys were crazy today. I appreciate it. Crazy, crazy generous. So, all right. Thank you, guys. I will go to